In today's episode, we are speaking to Willem Middelkoop, who actually is one of the, I think, greatest researchers into this real concept of this currency reset. He calls it the big reset in his book that he wrote. And we're going to be discussing that, how the IMF comes into play, where we are at in this reset that has been engineered, you could say, going all the way back to the creation of the IMF, how this affects Bitcoin, gold, and the future. So make sure you hit the like button on this side right over there or this side right over there to send this video out to more people in the YouTube universe. If you enjoy this video, make sure you leave us a comment right there down below. And last but not least, just a shout out to our sponsor today, which is First Majestic Silver, a publicly traded silver and gold mining company. So thank you, First Majestic Silver and Keith Newmeyer, for being our sponsor. And it's good to see you.
Yeah, we know Keith well. So I invited him to do a talk during our Discovery Day, because I'm here in the office of the Commodity Discovery Fund. That's a fund I started in 2008, and it's one of the very few in the world which is specialized in investing in small companies, exploration companies, being responsible for the largest discoveries worldwide. So gold, copper, nickel, zinc. And that's what we do here. We started with a few million in 2008. And now we have over 150 million assets under management. So that's going pretty well. And last year we had 85% return. So that's my advertisement. Now we can stop.
Congrats. That's amazing. Over 100 million moving into it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, you can clearly see that people are waking up. You know, normally we had to do webinars and interviews to get people interested. But now in February this year, you know, we had 180 new investors and over 15 million new money inflow without any promotion we did. So people are really getting, well, stressed, one could say.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to put it, but congratulations on that. Now, you wrote a book on the reset and you're seeing it play out in real time. I think it was last week where the Federal Reserve, or essentially the US government, is now giving the IMF, I believe it was 600 billion or something like that, probably the first of many installments. So give us an idea of what you were writing about when you put the Great Reset together and how it's playing out right now in real time.
Yeah, my book isn't called The Great Reset, but The Big Reset. I wrote the book in 2012, 2013, and it wasn't my first book. My first book was published in 2007, only in Dutch. I've been a market commentator for Dutch TV between 2001 and 2008. I started two companies in 2008. First book was published in 2007. I had quite a large following, and all my books are about the world's financial system and about the instability of world's financial system. And I always call myself a student of monetary history, so I go way back. And I even made an appendix for the Big Reset, which came out late 2013. And in the appendix, I showed that we've had over 200 fiat money systems in the world in the last 400 or 500 years. And they all failed. In the end, they all failed. There's not one example of a fiat money system which survived longer than 200 or 250 years. And the first example of a fiat money system was in China, Mongolia, in the 13th century. Marco Polo has written about that in his book. He traveled there in 1276, and they had a fiat money system there. The first one failed in the end. It can take 100 years, can take 150 years. But when a currency system isn't backed by anything intrinsic, you know, it always fails. So I got that understanding quite early in my career. I was a real estate investor in the 1990s, and I did it all mortgaged. I didn't have any spare money, so I had 8 rental properties, all mortgaged, and that was in the 1990s. So then I started to begin to understand that I should learn about leverage. Leverage is great in a bull market on the way up, but it can kill you on the way down. So that's when I started to study cycles, and that's when I became very interested in our financial system. And I soon learned that in the late 1990s that we reached a bubble phase in our economy, and that was when the first tech bubble was. You're very young. I think you haven't experienced that yourself in the late 1990s, but there was a tech bubble, internet bubble, and that collapsed in 2001, 2002, 2003. And the Fed reacted by bringing the rates down to 1%. And then they created this housing bubble, and that one collapsed in 2006, 2007. Lehman collapsed 2008. And then they started QE. And then Lehman collapsed actually 12 months after my first book came out. So then it was the proof for me that this fiat money system is going to fail in the end. And I became world famous in the Netherlands because I predicted the crisis in my first book, but it was only in Dutch. So it took a few years before I made a name for myself abroad. And in 2013, when The Big Reset was published, it has been translated into 7 languages, including Mandarin, Chinese, and to Arabic. That's why I get many invitations like this now to talk about the Big Reset. And the core thesis of the Big Reset, going back to your question, sorry for this long introduction, but the core thesis of the Big Reset is that we need to find a new anchor for world's financial system. Because in this fiat money system, the dollar is the anchor. And we all know, look at the mess. Look at the national debt. The national debt of the US was 10 trillion in 2000, before the internet bubble collapsed. And now it's almost 30 trillion. Look at worldwide central banks. Their total balance sheet was 5 billion in 2006. It's almost 30 trillion now. So we're adding layer and layer on top of the fiat money system. And the system needs to be rebooted, reset in the next few years somewhere. We need to find a new anchor. So I think the dollar will stay around, but it might be succeeded by the SDR. SDR is the currency basket of the IMF, in which the dollar still has the largest percentage. Over 40% of the SDR currency basket of the IMF is still are still dollars. And then there's the euro in that basket, and the British pound, and the yen, and they added the Chinese renminbi. And then it gets interesting, because now the Chinese renminbi is added to this currency basket of the IMF. This currency basket, the SDR, could well be used as a successor for the dollar. So we could start to price commodities and oil in SDR. I think that could well happen. And what's very, very interesting, because Trump was opposed to this idea, the Chinese always wanted to see this change. And Trump was opposed to this idea. And what we've seen in the last few weeks, that Janet Yellen, the former president of the Federal Reserve, she's now Secretary of the Treasury. And one of her first actions was sending a letter to the G20, the largest group of nations the group of the 20 largest nations in the world. And she proposed that we would allow the IMF to allocate or to print out of thin air over 600 billion of new SDR. And Trump was very opposed to this. And as you understand, that there has only been 200 billion of SDR being created since the late 1960s. If you triple the amount of SDRs available, well, that's a big move. That's a big sign, and that's what happened. The G20 approved this idea, so it was Janet Yellen's idea. So it comes from the Biden administration. The G20 approved this, and then the IMF allocated this new SDR position. And so every country being part of the IMF system, there's almost all countries, they will get part of this 600 billion as some kind of aid, because they all need financial aid now because of the corona crisis. Well, that's a very long answer to your short question.
That was amazing. So then my next question is, So why was Trump opposed? And then you said that Yellen gets in there and then there's this coordinated movement. So was this a battle of a nationalist versus an organized movement that is clearly taking place towards a reset?
Yeah, if I go back to my book, which I wrote as at 2012, 2013, and the core thesis of the book was that we needed to find a new anchor for the financial system, but we needed debt restructurings as well, and we needed a gold revaluation, means a dollar devaluation. So these are all important parts of a monetary reset. And why did I think a monetary reset would be next? Because we have had monetary resets in the past. The most well-known monetary reset was during the one which was organized during the Bretton Woods conference in 1944. That's where the US proposed an idea to make the dollar a successor for the gold standard. So we moved from a gold standard to a dollar standard. And the US had to promise to the 44 foreign countries who were all together in Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, that the foreign countries could always exchange surplus dollars into physical gold. So the dollar was as good as gold. That was promised in 1944. And that worked for a while, but then in the 1960s, we had the Vietnam War, and the US needed to start paying for all kinds of social programs. So more and more dollars were being created, and many countries, especially in Europe, thought that the dollar was being debased. That was the first debasement of the dollar. So they called on Washington and said, we would like to send our surplus dollars back to the US, and we want to have part of your gold holdings. And the French Navy even sent a ship to the port of Manhattan to collect the physical gold. And the Dutch Central Bank, they also made a similar call. And then Paul Volcker, who was the predecessor for Alan Greenspan, he flew with Air Force One here to Amsterdam to say, we have a problem with your request, you're rocking the boat. And then the president of the Dutch Central Bank, he wrote in his memoirs that he responded to Volcker, well, if this rocks the boat, then the boat's not very solid. So the central bankers during the 1960s already understood that the US was playing tricks. And then the US lost half of its physical gold holdings during these years because of all these repatriations of physical gold in exchange for the surplus dollars. And then President Nixon was advised by his economists that he couldn't deliver on his promise from wasn't his promise. He couldn't deliver on the US promise from Bretton Woods that the surplus dollars could always be exchanged in physical gold. So on August 15 in 1971, Nixon addressed the nation in a live television broadcast to say that the gold window would close for a short time, and then the US would have negotiations with the other trading partners in the world, and then decide how the system would be reset. A reset never happened, so a dollar crisis occurred in the early 70s. And then Paul Volcker had to rescue the system in the late 1970s by jacking up the interest rates towards almost 20%. And then the dollar stabilized. And since 1971, when the dollar was disconnected from gold became the enemy for the US dollar. And this explains why gold and silver prices are always managed lower, and the US is always calling on countries to sell their gold, but the US never sells any gold themselves. So this is all part of this build-up towards a reset needed now, because coming back to your question, again, is a very long answer. Trump already understood before he became president that one day he had to renegotiate the debt the outstanding US debt, and he had several remarks about that. But he was in this fight with China, and he had this US first, and it wasn't acceptable for him by giving more authority, more power to the IMF, because the IMF could also help countries he didn't like. So there was this stalemate in which the US wasn't willing to cooperate with the rest of the world to bring the system towards toward a next phase. And China has been very vocal since the collapse of Lehman that China wanted to to support the US, and China wanted to support the international financial system as long as a monetary reset would be planned for later on, for in the 2020s. And China always proposed, let's use the SDR by IMF, let's upgrade the SDR, let's make that into a liquid currency, so we can change from a dollar-based system towards an SDR-based system. And of course, this is a risk for the US, because the US, of course, likes to stay into a dollar system as long as possible. But now, since the Corona crisis has put so much pressure on the whole system, on the whole economy, and the US went into an overdrive, and 25% of all national debt has been created in the last 12 months for the US. So now we're reaching this 30 trillion on the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve, that everybody who understands this problem is looking at the IMF, because the IMF has a virgin balance sheet. So the balance sheets of all national banks, national central banks, have exploded in recent years, in the last 10 years. But the balance sheet of the IMF is near virgin. You know, you can use the balance sheet of the IMF. And that's what you do when you start to create SDR. You expand the balance sheet of the SDR.
Fascinating. Like you said, you're certainly a student of monetary history. If you're enjoying this video right now, please make sure you hit the like button on either side. Give us a comment down below and let us know you want to see Willem back on. Just wanted to stop and say that. Now, my next question is, so there are Rockefeller Foundation papers where they discuss making China the new central power. And there's also IMF Christine Lagarde saying she anticipates making the head of the IMF in China. So my question is then, is this a move towards China becoming the world power? And in addition to that, is this really solving anything by quote unquote reliquefying the world with dollars, if it's really just IMF becomes another very centralized global bank, essentially, with its own private interests that is just essentially refloating more fiat into the system?
Yeah, look, the IMF and the World Bank were created as part of the agreements of the Bretton Woods meeting. So technically, the IMF has always been like a world central bank. But we also have the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, which has been acting like a bank for central bankers. So the IMF never developed into a world central bank, but as the different parts of the world are working together more and more, since the whole world actually became a large village. You know, we all trade with each other. We're in this boat together, and especially the Chinese understand this very well. So if we go back in history, the US was the largest economy in 1870 already, but we were still in an era in which it was the empire it was the British Empire at that time. So the US became a larger economy than the British economy in 1870, but the US only took over in the financial system after the Second World War, 70 years later. So these changes take a long time. But if you study the world history and financial history, you always see that the empires, they change. The Dutch ruled the world one time. We even had Manhattan. We traded for Suriname. It wasn't a great trade. And then we had the Spanish Empire, and the Portuguese, and the British. So every 70 or 80 years, there's a new empire. There's a new master of the world.
Yeah.
And the US understands that it will be China again. If you study history, China has been the same kind of country, culture for the last 5 to 10,000 years. You know, there was mass production 10,000 years before before the start of our calendar in China. So that this is a very old culture. And the Chinese, their navy ruled the world in the 14th century already. And the power has shifted from east to west. And the US understands that the power will shift back to Asia, and we're in the process now. And it will only take a few more years before China will have the largest economy, because they have a country with 1.3, 1.4 billion people. US only has a country of 330 million people. So we all know China will become the largest economy, and the IMF knows as well. And if you look at the founding documents for the IMF, it clearly states that the headquarters of the IMF should be in the country with the largest economy. So there's not a conspiracy theory, but the IMF was constructed in a way that the US still has a veto power, because major and important solutions and agreements can only be reached when over 80% of the votes are in favor of the new agreement. And the US has such a high voting bloc, such a large voting bloc in the IMF, so they always can block certain changes. But it's not strange that the IMF is looking to a future in which China will become more important. And it's only a matter of time before the US will lose this privilege of being the world's reserve currency, like the British lost this position after the start of the First World War.
So how do central bank digital currencies play into this big reset that you've discussed, right? You've kind of talked about the reset from the perspective of like the IMF reliquefies countries, but then how does it impact the billions of people on the world? And are central bank digital currencies for you and I a necessity for this total movement to a larger reset?
Yeah, a few forces, a few developments are coming together. Because of the success of Bitcoin, central bankers have felt the urge to study digital currencies. And they understand when they don't come up with their own digital currencies, central bank digital currencies, there's a risk that more and more people will flee towards Bitcoin and other privately organized currencies. So the central banks have decided that the interest worldwide for crypto and digital currencies can be used to bring the official currencies to a next level. And once you have a digital Chinese currency, and the Chinese bank is ahead of the Western central banks, and they're testing a digital currency as we speak. But the ECB, the European Central Bank, is almost ready with its own digital currency as well. And we have the Federal Reserve, who is quite vocal about a digital dollar being almost ready to be tested. So if all these blocks have their own digital currency, central bank digital currency, we could combine these currencies in an IMF structure. We could add the SDR, we could add the other digital currencies and make a new worldwide currency. Let's call it the Bancor, like the old Keynesian plan for one world currency, not connected to one country, but organized by a world central bank, which could be the IMF. So the jury is still out. But if you want to know what will happen, I don't know it myself, but I listen very carefully to what central bankers say. And they don't say a lot, but sometimes they give a speech which shines a little light on the future. And you might know the name Mark Carney, who used to be the governor of the Bank of England. And Mark Carney was invited to Jackson Hole. That's the party of the Federal Reserve in July every year. And he was invited to do a speech in the summer of 2019, 2 years ago. And Google for that speech is still online. And he said that the world needs to find a new monetary system to replace the dollar. And this is not a conspiracy theory. The Financial Times, I have it here in front of me on the screen. The Financial Times reported the next day, Mark Carney calls for a global monetary system to replace the dollar. So it's official. And you can't imagine the Federal Reserve inviting Mark Carney to do that speech without knowing the content of the speech. Right. So why would the Federal Reserve ask a British central banker, the top British central banker, to call for a new global monetary reform to replace the dollar? That's because the Federal Reserve, of course, can't tell the world we need a successor for the dollar. So you ask a friend to tell the story. And Mark Carney gave some other comments, and he said there will be a change in this unsustainable monetary system. And he said the dollar is too dominant and it could be replaced by a digital currency. And reread his speech of 2 years ago. And with the current knowledge we have, if you reread his speech, it's quite clear what will happen. But he even gave another speech, or he wrote another article, also in 2019, which is very interesting. And the title of that piece was 50 Shades of Green. The world needs a new sustainable financial system to stop the runaway climate change. And now you begin to understand why there's all this talk about a great reset now coming from the World Economic Forum, and there was a cover. On Time magazine. We need to green the economy, and central bankers are all talking about how they need to help to stop climate change, and they will use this. They will spin the reset, the monetary reset, the big changes as being needed, because we had this corona crisis and now we need to help the poor countries. And as we start helping the poor countries, we better save the climate as well. And this will all be a spin that we as the worldwide audience, 7 billion people, accept all the major changes happening.
Because otherwise you basically can't spin a one world government currency controlled by a rogue organization. And that's the way that it occurs.
And this is a way also for the American people to accept it. You know, yep. It's like the Pentagon is calling for a alien invasion from space, and now we all should work together worldwide to stop the alien invasion. And that's why the corona pandemic was such a blessing in disguise. And that's why so many, you have so many conspiracy stories out there that they wanted this to happen. I'm not so sure about that, but there's this old wisdom: never waste a good crisis. So now we have this crisis worldwide. We better use it. So it explains why the World Economic Forum and all these. We had a speech by the president of the IMF a few months ago that we reached a new Bretton Woods moment. And everybody was thinking, what the fuck is she talking about? You know, we haven't had a new Bretton Woods system since the 1940s. So, and even it became even more interesting because, as you might know, in April, there's always the IMF Spring Week in which the central bankers and economists come together. And we had a few statements ahead of the meetings for this spring break. And Janet Yellen, who sent this letter to the G20 about the SDR, she sent out a few very interesting tweets. April 5th, Secretary Janet Yellen, she said, as I prepare to meet my colleagues from around the world this week at the IMF for the spring meetings, I find myself thinking back to the policymakers who gathered in Bretton Woods a year before I was born to define our post-war order. What we do in the coming months, again, Yellen's tweet, what we do in the coming months will have profound impacts on the trajectory of the global economic order and lead us to the next century of prosperity. And then we have another tweet by the Bretton Woods Committee, and the Bretton Woods Committee is not very official, but they have been around for decades, and you know, they're connected to the power structures in the US. And the tweet by the Bretton Woods Committee, April 7, so 2 days later, is happening now. IMF Managing Director joins John Lipsky to discuss the global economic outlook and consider how we can meet this new Bretton Woods moment. So we have some very high level and important players who are all calling this a new Bretton Woods moment, are talking about how we need to stop climate change and work together, and that we need to accept a great reset. And for me, as the author of the Big Reset, this is very interesting because it sounds like they all read my book.
Yeah, basically. I generally don't like it when centralized global powers are all using the words reset and order. It never seems like that's a good place to go. So
you will lose some of your liberties when they do that. Yeah.
Or all of them. I mean, you know, if you move to a global currency, that global currency can track everything that's happening, especially when one of the major players is a brutal communist regime. And those are the things that, you know, really brought me to making this channel. And you've presented a very compelling full picture that I know my audience is going to love. If you're watching this, please make sure you hit the like button on either side and give us a comment down below. So what's next then? Well,
Jake, you're American, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I understand your remarks about the communists. And of course, many things go wrong in China. I've been in China a lot. I've been in the US a lot. What's often not discussed, that with all the military actions by the US after the Second World War, if you study history, how the Vietnam War started and some other conflicts, you know, there has been academic studies that over 20 million people died worldwide, direct or indirect. So we shouldn't blame it all on the communists. Huh?
Right. I'm with you. I mean, you have a global centralized system that has profited off of war. In most instances, they weren't even real stories, and so you go to this position where you go, what's next, though? Because you've had these lockdowns that the UN said back in July that at least 200 million people will be pushed back into extreme poverty. If that was in July, and then we've had numerous more iterations of this. In the United States, there's a mass amount of people that can't pay their rent and their mortgage. I don't know what the data is, but before it happened, you had the average American couldn't come up with $500 for an emergency. And so that was before this occurred. And then when we're in America, we kind of think of this bubble that we're in. And one of the big concerning things about this all to me is, the effect on global economies, because especially economies that relied off tourism, a lot of that's gone. Those people were living just at the poverty line. Now you've got that happening globally. And then you go, well, what's next here? Is this
universal basic income? Huh?
Okay.
Well, actually, you have it in the US already when you send people checks every quarter.
do you think it's a global unit? Do you think there's a move to a global currency and then there's essentially a global UBI?
Well, could be coming if you have this central bank digital currency. It's a very small step that we all get a mail that we can download a wallet with our national bank, or we could download an IMF wallet, and on that wallet is a certain amount of money which can only be spent on, let's say, food, because that's the great thing about central bank digital currency. You know, they can say you can only spend it in these kind of shops, or you can only spend it in this location, because it's digital. You know, you can do very specific, you can target very specific payments. You can even change interest rates for savings. It can be very negative for savings in one country. So I think authorities will use this crisis to build an even more global order. And since there's so much poverty now, and we already know that the IMF have said we will need and we will use the SDR creation to help the poor countries. I think the 600 billion which have been created now this last month is for starters. The next round could be 2 trillion. And what's interesting, because people always ask me, well, you know, the SDR, these markets aren't liquid enough, so how can the SDR take over from the dollar? There have been academic papers talking about an IMF substitution fund, which could be used so countries can send their treasury holdings to the IMF, and that would be transformed or substituted to SDR holdings. So many of these steps could all lead to a monetary reset, and a monetary reset is often not a binary event, but when you look back 10 years from now, 15 years from now, you can conclude, well, a lot has changed in the last 10 years. So that's what I mean with a monetary reset. You know, it's often not a binary event.
Yeah, it's a process.
Yeah.
Man, I wish this has been so fun. I've really enjoyed you coming on. I wish we had another 3 hours, because that's about what you need to take in all your research. So
let's do it another time.
So let's wrap up right here with, as we're coming to an end, what does one do to prepare? I mean, you painted a very complete picture. What does one do to prepare? And let's start there.
Yeah, when you're poor and you don't have any assets, you know, there's not much you can do. I always advise people, the most important thing is being flexible. And the current crisis in Corona, the current economic and medical crisis already showed this. If you can move out of a big city very easily and go to Colorado and work online, you're doing much better than somebody who's stuck with a company and large staff and can't move. So be flexible. I always try to have, I'm part of the time I'm in the Netherlands, part of the time I'm in Switzerland. I never want to have a property in Spain, or because I need to fly to Spain, I can drive to Switzerland. So this all helps you to be flexible, because we don't know how things will develop. We don't know where life will be better. You know, Switzerland's part of Europe, but it's not part of the EU. And if you look at your financial situation, you shouldn't trust the dollar. You should get diversified away from the dollar, because the dollar could well be devalued. And it's a sign that two major banks on Wall Street have advised their clients to buy gold and hedge part of their dollar holdings up to 50%. So I think a dollar devaluation could be in the card. Being invested into Bitcoin for, let's say, 5 or 10% of your assets is as wise as being invested into physical gold and silver for, let's say, 20 or 25%. In my portfolio, 25% of the assets in real estate, 25% in equities, 25% in physical gold and silver, and 25% in cash/Bitcoin. And if you have this model, you will survive most of the scenarios, because I don't know which scenario will play out. We can end into inflation or even hyperinflation. I doubt it, because central banks know hyperinflation is the largest risk, and you can always bring gold back into the system to avoid hyperinflation. But we can have runaway inflation, we can have deflation, we can have banks closing, we can have stock exchange closing. I'm not saying this will happen, but it all can happen. It has happened in the future. So don't put all your money in your 401k. Don't put all your money in Bitcoin. They can close off the on and off ramps to the Bitcoin system. They can't undo a Bitcoin, but they can close the on and off ramps from Bitcoin, from crypto towards fiat, that you can't pay with it. So be flexible and have all kind of different assets if you are wealthy enough to do this. And I had a presentation with Tony Robbins last week. That the average net worth is 10 million in their club, and I think the average net worth of people listening to you, that will be between almost zero and millions and millions. So it's very hard to give a general advice. But one thing is very interesting, and I think that's physical silver. Physical silver is very undervalued. The gold-silver ratio is still very in favor of silver. Silver is trading 50% under the level it was trading at in 1980. And silver could have an incredible rise once the silver suppression and manipulation breaks. So silver is quite cheap. You can buy an ounce of silver for $25. And I think it's available for many people, and as long as it's available physical for this at this valuation, you should buy some.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it. I know we're sticking to our time frame, so I'd love to have you back on. That was an incredibly fascinating conversation. For everyone listening, we'll have Willem's Twitter account. We'll also link to his book, The Big Reset, which is available in English as well. Make sure you hit the like button on this side or this side to send this out to more people. Obviously, this was a powerful conversation. I think it was very enlightening. And if you found value from the things that he was discussing here, please make sure you hit that like button, share this video on Twitter, share this video on text or email, and let's keep helping people prepare as much as we can for what may be occurring. Give us a comment down below that says that you'd like to see Willem back on as well. Please give us a comment down below. And any last words, my friend?
Yeah, one more. I forgot to tell. People always say to me, well, you run this business and you write books because you want to make money on it. And I love to make money, but the Big Reset is available for free on our website. You can download the full manuscript. It was revised in 2017. It's a few years old, but it's still very. I think it's still a lot of valuable information in it. So people can download the Big Reset for free on our website, and that's the website of the Commodity Discovery Fund. So Google it and you'll find it.
Awesome. We'll link that right there down below as well for the CD fund. So thank you everyone for listening to this video. Be sure to subscribe, bell notification, and let us know if you enjoyed this episode in the comments down below.